Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Thank you very much, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to the Keshe American Knowledge Team Meeting 2025. Another beautiful Sunday afternoon. It would really be nice if it was beautiful everywhere on this planet, and that's what we're trying to do. So we have challenges. We have to learn about our history, and we have to learn about the new technology, because one thing that is absolutely clear, crystal clear, is that what we've been working on has not been working. So we need to change the process here. So let's see if we can get on with it. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. We are proceeding on a new series, the Intermediate Nanotech series. The subject is Point Blank. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is June the 15th, 2025, and this is part of the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. We wrapped up last week with the nanotech in the basic series. We talked about nanocapsules, nanotubes, nanostars, the portability of energy, and causticity and switchboards. And we are now proceeding into the Intermediate Nanotech series, and there is a point to make, and we will discuss that in great detail in this series, because we've been doing this for many years, and we've been trying to condense the knowledge, but it of itself is starting to develop into a large load. We've always been trying to distill the knowledge of the thousands of hours of teaching that the Keshe Foundation has been putting forward. And our challenge right now is, how do we move ahead without leaving the rest behind? So we don't want to leave anybody behind. It's very important that as people who are not aware of the new technology and not aware of the capability of what it can do with respect to bringing peace on this planet, we need to open it up to them. And each and every one of us has a responsibility in our own way to achieve this. And so what we hope is this plasma education series will help you in formulating your ideas, maybe coming up with better ways to present, or maybe triggering something where you come up with even a better idea. And that's what's most important. So each of us in our own way has that full capability to be able to deliver this science to our families, to our neighbors, and to those who are not aware. Our primary goal, of course, is to reach those who wish for peace and prosperity on this planet. And as a fallout from that, we will achieve peace and prosperity for everyone on this planet. This has been outlined in the books by Marin Tavakolikesh, book number 1, The Universal Order of the Creation of Matter. And we repeat, because it's fundamental. We have to understand that there's a matter state, a dark matter, and an antimatter. And these three come together to converge into one matter state. And then in book number 2, The Structure of the Light, it tells us how we go from one matter state to another matter state, or how we go from the creation of one matter state to the creation of another matter state. So what we're talking about here is in an undifferentiated context. So we're not saying at what energy level, we're not saying at what energy state, but when we talk about the structure of light, the implication, of course, is that it's in the visible light. Now we know that there is invisible light and that it operates in the same manner. And so we need to understand this, because in book number 3, which was kind of stunning, we call that The Origin of the Universe. And so we see that there's a sister universe along with our universe. And this is the universe that we're focused on, except for one small little detail. And that small little detail is the small detail of our Earth space. That's all we're focused on. And even that's not enough. We are even focused on a small portion of land on that Earth space, and we continue to fight over it. And so history has shown the consequences of that, and it's tough to learn from our mistakes. But learn we have to, or we suffer the consequences. That's why for 382 weeks in a row, Rick Crammond and the Universal Council have brought together one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace, because peace and prosperity is what we need to bring on this planet. And the methodology of peace and prosperity is how we engage with the members of the Universal Council. And that council extends beyond the Earth space. So we cannot get there if we don't have peace and prosperity on this planet. So why is that? And it has to do with not understanding the plasma rule. We understand the survival of the fittest, where the higher strength eats the weaker strength. But in the plasma science, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so when we see two fields coming together, whether they be opposing ideas or opposing armies, it represents a kind of a conflict point. And that conflict always falls within a binding zone, and that binding zone includes the two members of the conflict point. So it automatically brings a manifestation together based on the density of that binding zone, and we call that the inertia density manifestation. So that's the terminology aspect of it. But we've failed to understand how important energy binding is and how it is created, because it is important for our existence. But we've forgotten how we got here, and we continue to operate on a self-serving basis, which is very important. We all have the right of self-determination, but not at the expense of others. The universe provides everything that we need, and so by stealing from others or fighting others, denying others, we're actually shortchanging ourselves. And that is fairly obvious. So it all comes down to the basics where we have charted a path based on the 10 commandments, and then we find out there's another 14 commandments. And in that list, one of the most important ones is thou shalt not lie. And this is a real problem for poker players everywhere because the success of a good poker player is how well you can lie, because the liar wins. And that's one of the problems with the game of poker. Everyone likes to play that game of poker, and supposedly there are rules, but the ultimate goal of the game is for one to lead, one to win, and the others to lose. In fact, all the others to lose. Only one winner. And so it's a fun game if you like entertainment. But if you're just whiling away the hours, sure, it's a lot of fun. But if you're gambling on your rent, or you're gambling on your country's future, or you're gambling on your welfare of your countrymen, it's not so much fun. It doesn't fall under the rule of gamesmanship. So each of us individually have our own battles. We're seeking vitality enhancement, and that vitality enhancement contributes to our emotional and physical well-being. And that is guaranteed by the universal community. But for some reason, we are gravitating towards the regular and shying away from the super. And it's not working, is it? Because we need a vitality enhancement. So what we're finding is we have a population that is getting old and decrepit. And that really wasn't a logical train of thought. But it has extended itself that we have many who are young and decrepit. And that kind of really changes the train of thought. So age has been taken out of the equation with respect to aging, and with respect to health, and with respect to prosperity, vitality, and peace, of course. So those are not really the factors anymore. There are other factors that we need to understand. So there is a transmutation highway that's operating in the background, and we're nowhere near it. We're operating on a transmission highway where we regard things that have to do with frequency, such as heat and pressure, and of course, light, visible light. So the transmutation highway is many orders of magnitude higher in terms of energy. And that's what we want to elaborate today, because in order for us to differentiate what we have, we can't just go and dig it up. We would have to know how it's created in the first place. And that means we need to extend our knowledge. So this is the course that we're embarking on this series, because frankly, we did produce the cups of life, and they did give us the vitality and the emotional and physical strength. And that did come from our understanding of the nanocoding process of the monatomic science. And so this is in the intermediate nanotech extension of the nanocoding process, but that is not being used on the advanced part of the science. It is a ways and means of teaching us the different energy states and the relativity of these energy states. And that's the whole point. So we understand that we can create a GANS product, which is a radiance manifestation of the coming together of the basic physicality and the nano-coded physicality in an environment such as a caustic environment and a saline environment, and produce different gases. The most fundamental, of course, are the carbon, the calcium, the zinc, and the copper. And let's not forget water, which is the solvent of life, and amino acids, which are the contra to the water. When we produce water, we produce protein, and the two don't mix. Oil and water don't mix, and the reason they don't mix is because we stand erect. And if we didn't, we would just be mush. And so we find that there are individual differentiated things that happen. But before we get there, we have to understand that there's a basic science that has to do with the one-track cup of the soul, where it's a representation of the magnetical gravitational effects and of the soul. So the pattern is that each individual cup, be it an emotional cup or a physical cup, has a magnetical gravitational relationship. And the cup of the soul, likewise. And each cup has a soul. But when we bring all three together, as we do in the book number 1, The Creation of Matter, there is a magnetical gravitational relationship and the soul. And to arrive at that is a progression. And so we hope to go step by step through that progression because it helps us as mature knowledge seekers to review where we've been and where we're going and to stay on course. And we are continually brought back to the beginning. And what has prompted this whole discussion is that there are many new knowledge seekers who are coming on very rapidly, and they want to catch up very rapidly. And so we're challenged. And how do we explain this when we are only working in the singular physical dimension? So we're totally ignoring the one-track cup of the universe, which is how our minds operate. We have 2 hemispheres in our brain, and they operate the same way as the cups of life do. We have a copper GANS, which is physical, and a zinc GANS, which is emotional, and we have the carbon gen, which is the carbon GANS of the environment, and you bring those 3 together to come together into the body of the physicality. But there's more, because we retain the brain, we retain the physicality, and all the other attributes that are accrued to it. So this follows that the Earth space has the same properties. And so we see the manifestation of the many elements on the periodic table of elements, where we have not only different elements, but we can create different ganses of each of these elements. So the question then becomes is, how do we differentiate this? And so that becomes an important point, because the only thing that we've been concerned about in a great way because of the commercialization of our physical knowledge has been to excavate many of these minerals and then trade with them and make other goods from them, completely oblivious to how they were created. And in turn, we become completely oblivious to how we were created. And since it's hard to get those answers, then we kind of just live with it and ignore that. Well, we're coming to the point now where we have to ask those questions, because the answers are becoming obvious. And that one answer is what we know is not working. So there has to be a new knowledge. And that's why we're in the Beyond Beijing era. It only happened on May the 10th of 2025, where we publicly showed the production of gold. That which we dig up without any knowledge, just with a pick and a shovel and maybe a different scale, but we're still digging. Well, now we can create it. And not only that, but we can create whatever we want. And so if that is the case, that means that we can create peace as well. So then the question is, what is it that we want? And so we find that we have fallen victims to this angular density, which has to do with what we call the falling. We see the fallen angels, and that's how we rationalize it. But we see that these fallen angels follow the laws of angular momentum, which equals the moment of inertia times the angular velocity. So that's the mathematical reason. But the thing is, it falls to increased density, it falls to increased pressure, and it falls to increased gravity. And so that is the answer. But how does that happen? So we start to enter an era where the orders of magnitude become significant. So what does that mean? And say you drive your car and you're doing 100 kilometers per hour. Well, if you step up one order of magnitude, you would be doing 1,000 kilometers per hour. And if you did 2, that would be 10,000. And if you did 3, that would be 100,000. Well, can you imagine how many speeding tickets you would get in your community? But maybe you'd be going so fast that they wouldn't even be able to catch you to give you the speeding ticket. So the question that we have is, why in our physicality are we limited in our speed, and yet light can seem to travel at light speed? And light speed is many orders of magnitude faster than how we can drive. But we need to see that there's a relationship in orders of magnitude. So that is a factor of 10. And in our computer systems, we've gone from mega to giga to terabytes. And we see that is a lot of memory. And we need that memory because of the demands of the video processing, which is now becoming quite common. But if we go in the other direction, we go from micro to nano, and that's the subject we're talking about, the nanotech. And then we find that beyond the nanotech is the picotech, which we haven't even talked about yet. But this is all part of the plasma science. So we see that the old science is stuck inside a box. And if we want to advance into these upper levels of magnitude, we have to step outside the box. And so we see that this is a two-way street, that we can step outside by going larger, we can step outside by going smaller. And how big is large, or how big is small? And how do we step up, or do we have to step down? And what does it mean to go from step to step? And so the old science has had some answers, but in the new science, we see that the plasma energy is the foundation of this change in levels of magnitude. So one of the things that when we talk about a plasma field, it's undifferentiated. It's just it's a field. Well, how big is the field? So I guess it all depends on how big a fence you have. The bigger the longer the fence, I guess the bigger the field. But it also has a lot to do with conformity. But fundamentally, when we get into the very large, the tera, 10 to the 12th, it's a large field. So as we go down by a level of magnitude, those fields get smaller, progressively smaller. And so we're only showing the 3 steps going from tera to giga to mega. But we can go even further below 1, and we find that they get smaller and still smaller. So if we say a plasma field, we don't know what we're talking about, because it's just like you say a car. Well, does it have 3 wheels or 4 wheels or 6 wheels, or is it blue or is it gray? And well, you don't even know if the steering wheel is on the proper side. So when we talk about building dimensions, it's a point, it's a blank point, and it's undifferentiated. So there has to be a starting point. And that was shown in the creation of matter. But we didn't say which matter, just any matter. And then to build a dimension, you add a point and then connect, but it's still undifferentiated. And so we can add another point, and then we connect only 2 of the 3, and it's still undifferentiated. And as we'll see, we can add another point and connect 3. It's still undifferentiated. Each of these points is just a blank point, just showing us a basic dimension building. And so this has an important thing in terms of reference, because it's a star formation. And so just through the nature of the star formation, we introduce the magnetico-gravitational relationship. And it's still undifferentiated. So it's just a star formation, the concept. And that concept is the breaking of the chains of man, where we go from the chain density of the atomic structure to the unchained density of the monatomic structure. And so we find that we still have the physical matter, but the way it is bonded together is very different. In the atomic structure, there is a physical link, but in the monatomic structure, there's a bonding. And it could be a covalent, or it could be a trivalent, or a tetravalent bonding. So when we look at the 3 dimensions and how we can traverse these 3 dimensions, each dimension has its own pathway. So we have an x-axis, and it goes from point to point, and it follows a path. So the y-axis is certainly not going to follow that path. And the z-axis is going to follow another different path. And so if you only look at the one path, you don't see the other paths. And the question is, which path do you follow? Well, the path that you follow is not the other path. You have to follow an open path. But if you were to bring these and recombine them, you would find that structure, that inherent structure of the 3 dimensions. But the thing is, we know that in the lowest energy state, it creates a crystalline stability. And it does this through a crystalline connectivity. So we start to have different formations, and they kind of represent the different structures, but they're all different. And here we're only looking at the fundamental 3-dimensional aspects, possibilities of the x-axis, y-axis, and the z-axis. But the thing is that crystalline portability will go through different energy transitions. In other words, it'll keep its paths going from solid to liquid to gaseous to the plasma state. So we need to have some kind of map to summarize everything. So we'll bring into account MAGRAV mileposts. One moment, please. So what are MAGRAV mileposts? They show MAGRAV relationships. These MAGRAV relationships could be ranges, could be gradients, but they involve things that we all commonly talk about. We talk about our bodies. Our body is a MAGRAV relationship between the emotional and physical structure. Our body is comprised of atoms. So is the Earth space. So are the minerals. And an atom has an electron-proton MAGRAV relationship. And then, of course, water, which is very important for the Earth space. It's very important for our space. And it has a hydrogen-oxygen MAGRAV relationship. And then, of course, water is not just water. We have a way to measure what water is. It's a pH table, potentiation of hydrogen, and it has an acidic alkaline MAGRAV relationship. So what all these things have in common is a charge, and that is a negative positive. Excuse me, what happened there? It's a negative positive MAGRAV relationship. So all MAGRAV relationship have a magnetical gravitational range. And within that range, there is a gradient. So when we look at these MAGRAV mileposts, we have to see that there is a MAGRAV condition that envelopes these relationships. So that MAGRAV, in order to exist, has to have these relationships of these emotional and physical. In other words, there has to be a containment within the magnetical gravitational field. And of course, it's also true for gold and any other mineral. The physical manifestation is dependent on this MAGRAV relationship. And so it may not be obvious, but the thing is, it is repeatable. It is verifiable. It's not a theory. And the reason it's graduated beyond the theory is because we have the practical application for it. And just give me a second here to see if I can fix this up, because I think it's a very useful thing, isn't it? In other words, what we're saying here is we have to be a little bit more positive in our work. It isn't all negative. We'll get there. There. And now we know what the charge means, negative and positive. But which way does it go? Which way does the gradient go? Because a gradient can go, sure, like a toboggan, downhill. The steeper the slope, the faster you go. But it could go uphill as well. And so for many of us, going downhill is a lot easier than going uphill. Just look at how you approach stairs. That's assuming that you hit all the stairs and you don't just come tumbling down like Jack and Jill. But let's get back to the point. The point is that when you're talking about dimension positioning, each point is undifferentiated. So what you're seeing here is that each point is a negative point because it's the end point. And so if the end point is negative, then the connector is positive. So as we see the creation of that point, it's represented in book number 1, the universal order creation of matters. And the other point, likewise, undifferentiated, is also represented by book number 1, the universal order creation of matters. So now we have 2 books number 1. Well, what is the connector? Well, that's the point. It's the structure of the light. That's what connects one point to the other point. So our dimension positioning means that we can be in one point and then we can move to another point. But what is now becoming apparent that we can be in 2 points simultaneously. Now, if that seems very far-fetched, we know that the modern computers can operate with multiple monitors. So you have one computer with 2 displays, and they're different. So we know that that is possible. So maybe when we're talking about the dimension positioning, we can operate the same way. And shall we say, we just, for simple description, oscillate between the 2 points. But in order to do that, we have to do that very rapidly. So we know that light travels at a very fast speed. So that may be the explanation that we need in terms of that. But it's still undifferentiated because we don't know where on this highway we're going to be. But if we were to suggest the carbon inertia highway, because this highway goes into many different directions, we find that the carbon inertia highway also has different points. So we find, for instance, the basic point is that carbon 14 and carbon 10 are 2 points on the transition highway, and that totals 24. Carbon 16 and carbon 8 likewise totals up to carbon 24, but that's on the transmutation highway. So we find that our viewpoint of the transmission highway, if we say, well, we only have carbon 12, we have to understand that it's only half the picture. There is another picture that we're not seeing. So let's recognize that it's there. So to balance everything out, so carbon 12 with carbon 12 would be carbon 24. And so that is in the initial positioning. But in order to create that position, because it's an inertia highway, we understand that the inertia highway comes together from the interaction of two fields. So we now can look at the carbon-14 as saying, well, it's undifferentiated. It's just carbon-14, and we don't know where it comes from, but wherever it comes from, there's another carbon-14. Because that connection connects to everything. And if there's a carbon-14, then there's another carbon-10. So then the question becomes, if the carbon-14 comes together with the carbon-10, makes you carbon-24, which 14 are we talking about, and which 10 are we talking about? And then the same question will apply to the carbon-16. So then we come to the anomaly. You say, well, okay, the transmutation highway seems to have two undifferentiated choice. And the transition has two undifferentiated choices. So what's happening on the transmission highway? So when we talk about a dimension positioning, then there's another choice in the background. And so when we connect one point to the other point, are we certain that we can't cross over? We're just going to say that there is a possibility we could make a choice, say, on the foreground pair or on the background pair. They still follow the universal order of creation of matters, and they're still connected with the structure of the light. But now we have different choices. But then if we look at the transmission and we say, well, where is its choice? And so we always say, well, let there be light. Well, that light has to come from somewhere. And why don't we have the light? Because it's a lot darker on our side? Is that the point? So now we have more choices. And since we have those more choices, we have to understand that our dimension positioning, although still undifferentiated, can take new choices. And they would still work. And as unbelievable as it might be for the average person, we all know that we drive our cars to work, or we drive our cars to the grocery store, but we don't do it the way we were born. We don't do it the way we go to sleep. We don't do it the way we think. So if there's an unseen, undifferentiated reality, then we understand that our dimension positioning is based on that. Because that dimension is an inertia Maggrav condition. So we can change our dimension sizes by orders of magnitude, and we can also change the sizes of our sources by orders of magnitude. So this changeability gives us a lot of versatility. And then in addition to the dimension positioning, now we can also have a gradient change. So these points appear to be equal, but they're not. Because in order to make a relationship you have to have a magnetical gravitational relationship. And so when we look at the size of the field, the larger field is gravitational and the smaller field is magnetical. And so we didn't say how big or how small because it's still undifferentiated, and we didn't say what it was. We're just talking about the relationship and the positioning. So we have a choice of which reality it comes from, we have a choice of which energy state, and we have a choice of which gradient. So many choices, and yet we seem to be locked into a position. And then we find that there's a dimension anomaly. Because as we said, with respect to the gradient, with the toboggan going downhill or you climbing up a hill, then a funny thing happens. The magnetical field would be larger and the gravitational field would be smaller. Because the smaller it gets, the more gravitational it is. Because as the fallen angels fall to density. And the greater the density, the greater the pressure. And the greater the pressure, the greater the gravity. And so as we get more and more gravitational towards the core, it becomes smaller. So now we have an anomaly, and this is hard for people to understand. And that is because this is a two-way street. So how do we navigate on that two-way street? So we have to understand that there are connections. And these connections don't need to be absorbed, but can remain within their integrity and just overlap. So we still have the dimension building where we have one point hooked up to another point, still undifferentiated, but we can have another point hooked up to another point. And well, why don't we just keep that going? And we find that we can have another pair of connections. And as we put these three pairs together, so the key word is pairs, twins, we create a gravitational base. What defines a gravitational base? It has absorbed more energy. It has more energy to give. So this is the basis and the foundation of dimension building. And so we've talked in the past about a star formation. So here we are with the foundational base that is gravitational, which means the top of the star is magnetical. But where is this? So when we put these rotating balls of GANs in a star formation, we created a gravitational dimension. And that was the production of gold. And we did that publicly. And so we showed the rotating balls. But this was done for instruction purposes only because this is obsolete technology. So here we are discussing the nanotech, which is fundamentally obsolete. However, the principles are not. The principles transcend all the way. So if we can understand that it takes two rotating balls and they are overlapping in their connectivity, and then they are on all the points. So you have your three outer points, which are your gravitational, and you have the one point in the center, which is magnetical. And you say, well, wait a second. They're all on the same level. Well, in terms of height, yes. But in terms of positioning, no. And in terms of field strength, no. So the three pairs on the outside are gravitational, and the one pair in the center is magnetical. And the energy goes from the higher to the lower. But as we've seen, the gradient change is a two-way street. So the question then becomes, is which is higher and which one is lower? This is why it's so important to understand the difference between the magnetical and the gravitational, because the magnetical is the giver and the gravitational is the taker. But it's undifferentiated because we didn't say who we're giving to and we didn't say who we're taking from. And so this is the basic anomaly and the basic cause of a lot of the confusion. But the point of the matter is that each of these rotating fields is individually manufactured by each rotating ball. And then when they all come and work together, they are all rotating, they are all working together, and they're all working together for a purpose. And so when we look at a dynamic plasma, we can see that the field extends beyond the physicality. We have to take that into account because it's there. It's the answer to everything. Just because you can't see it and you can't touch it doesn't mean it's not there, and we have the proof to prove it. And each of us has been able to do that with GANs, which is the product that's created from the nanotech. So the GANs is part of the matter state, the small m matter state. But the fields are part of the plasma state, and bringing together the plasma states is all part of the dynamic plasma state. And so there we have the relationship between the magnetical and the gravitational. So the dynamic plasma, well, it can go in two directions. This is the key. We're just looking at it going from one direction. We started with the physical, we made the nanotech, then we made the GANs, and then we made the plasma. But what happens when we go in the opposite direction? Well, we just retrace our steps. So we find that the core component is also a star formation. So a star formation has a magnetical gravitational relationship, but it is not in isolation. It has a relationship with its neighbor. And so its neighbor has to have an orientation that is complementary. So we haven't defined where this is. It's just a relationship between two star components. But in order to make it work, we have to go into each and every direction. So there has to be a change in polarity. There has to be a change in relationship. And then there has to be an interaction to offer some kind of bonding. And that bonding is also to respond to the rules of the gravitational magnetical force fields. So if we have each star formation having its own magnetical gravitational force field, and then the neighbor has a magnetical gravitational force field in any direction, and then there's a relationship between them, which is unseen. And that too is a magnetical gravitational relationship. So I think we can see the point. The point could be gravitational. The point could be magnetical. We haven't identified the relationship with the environment. It doesn't matter. What matters is that there's a portability of energy that is undifferentiated in its simplicity. It's differentiated in its complexity because the complexity is more stable. And so that stability leads to portability, where we can, by a gradient of stability, which is a charge, go through the switchboard both ways. It's a two-way street through the switchboard connection. That's where we left off with the basic nanotech, to understand that there's a transition matter from the negative and the transition matter of the positive, and it comes together in the transfer state of the NP junction. And we just call it the transfer state because we don't know where it's going, but it is the junction, and it can go one way or it can go another way. It has a choice, and that is only two choices. But when we look at the conservation of energy, we have multiple choices, because each side on the laws of conservation have to be in balance. So each side has to have a conservation of a maggrav, which is the balance of the magnetical gravitational positioning of each side of the equation. But if the equation goes through different energy states, then you have to have a conservation of inertia, which is the maggrav condition of the different energy transfer states. And then likewise, one can be connected from the higher to the lower, or one can be connected from the lower to the higher, or there could be other choices that are unseen. And each one has a maggrav condition, which is a magnetical gravitational relationship. And then each one, based on its susceptibility, will position itself. So what is very instructive is in the nanotech, because we've seen when we nano-coated a copper wire, we ended up with carbon. Strange. So when we look at water, we know that we can change the pH. But if we look at the potentiation of strength, that also happens. The relationship between the initial potential energy and the final potential energy, and the relationship between the initial kinetic energy and the final kinetic energy. These are all based on the magnetical gravitational relationships. This is fundamental to the understanding, because it all has to do with the potentiation of balance. And so this is where, we see it as one side being acidic and another side being alkaline, but, there's a acid forming and there's an alkaline forming characteristic that causes the susceptibility to change. We're not seeing that. We're just seeing the inertia product. That's the point. So the energy portability now is coming through different energy state transitions, where we can elevate to a higher energy state that takes from the physical matter state to the energy state, or we can lower it to the through inertia, where the energy state gets lowered to the physical matter state. That's not a condemnation of the level. That's just the way things work. And each and every one of them has their own purpose and their own characteristics. And when we overcompensate on one, we tend to rob from the other. And that is where we go out of balance. It's hard to achieve peace and prosperity when you're out of balance. So when we look at the Z-axis stairway to density, we see that it actually is going down towards density, what we call the angular density. And so when we reach a certain point, we change the pH. And the change in the pH is by order of magnitude. And once we come to the midpoint, we not only change the pH, but we change the personality of the atomic physicality. As we go up, we go from the acidic to the alkaline, but as we go down, we go from the alkaline to the acidic. So these are all part of the transmission susceptibility gradients. And so we discovered how the pH of the inertia field is done. If you want it to be acidic, you have to add more acid to it. But the thing is, we have a change within each magnetical gravitational relationship. So you add the acid to the acidic, you add the alkaline to the alkaline. So what you're getting is an inertia product. This not only is a pH transition, but it's an energy portability. And that can be within the range, from one range to another range, or from a state to a state. And so we see that this splitting of the pH is representative in many different potentiation layers. And so the y-axis density transition in terms of nanotech is due to causticity and the unstable energy transition state. So at this point, we're talking about where it's undifferentiated, but the basis of it is represented in hydrogen. Hydrogen has an affinity where it can be orthohydrogen or parahydrogen. And you say, oh, so hydrogen itself is not just hydrogen. And so that coming from the source, and we talk about this connection with carbon-14, and in the universe with carbon-60, and then beyond. We still haven't even got there. We're still on the basic physical science. And then how do we talk about the unicos? And then beyond that, how do we talk about the creator? So the basis of our knowledge is not there yet. But if we can understand the basics of our nanotech, that'll be very helpful, because this is how we can understand the periodic table of switchboards, because our Earth space seems to understand that very, very well, because each and every element on this periodic table is within our environment, And if we understand that every location of every single element is based on its nearness and proximity and its relationship to its neighbors. Because it's the environment of the neighbors which allows it to exist. Because if you cannot have that containment, the magnetical gravitational containment and its stability, you cannot maintain that position and that dimension position, nor that energy state position, which is why we have solids, liquids, and gases. So we know that we have those three dimensions, but we don't recognize or accept that these are inertia products, which means that there is an plasma substructure that created it. And that's the whole point. So we don't care which element it is. They're all created the same way. So there's the pH stairway of both poles, where you can elevate through causticity, or you can facilitate the inertia through maggrav positioning. And then you have all the different potentiation plasma layers in between. And these are all representative of the different gradients. So when we're looking at the nuclear feeding inertia, we find that these are all fragments of the complexity. So each one has a field that is culminating from the sum of three other fields, such as 1 + 1 + 1. And we didn't say which one, but it comes together as more than three, because the gravitational stability is portable through the various dimensions. So whether we have the matter state, the dark matter, or the antimatter, the nuclear feeding inertia operates by the same rules. And it's a two-way street. So it can slide down the hill or climb up the hill. So we have to set up maggrav pathways. This is how we create it, with the force fields of attraction and the force fields of repulsion. Attraction is the gravitational intensity, and the repulsion is the magnetical outtensity. So the intensity then gives us the feedback, and the outtensity is the feeding, and still undifferentiated. But when we say electrons and neutrons, there's a dimension anomaly. So fundamentally, yeah, we can say that one is bigger than the other, but did we say which one? So then that becomes the problem. Because in the beginning, the neutron came before the atom and the PM tick. So we didn't say which neutron, we didn't say which atom, and we didn't say which PM tick, but we did say, let there be light, because we know that light comes from the darkness. And we didn't even say which light. So this is all fundamental, basic science. The principal matter is the magnetical PM ticks, which are part of the feeding, and the convergence of the antimatter, dark matter, and the matter gen, which is part of the plasma gen conversion. And then we have to have that environment, which is the Earth space, which it too is a maggrav that follows the same rules of the gravitational convergence. And then we have the field interaction, which becomes an inertia product. So within the field interaction and inertia product of the Earth space, we have the field interaction of the inertia product of our inner space. our physicality. So it's a product of the combination of the plasma. And so it requires a combination of two plasmas, one of which is magnetical and one of which is gravitational. And then they interact. And then you now have the basis to interact in a MAGRAV relationship with physicality. So this is where we're having the problem, because the matter plasma dimensions involve both the gravitational of the physical and the magnetical of the emotional. And we are feedback dominant. We only work with the physicality. We discount the rest. And we do that at our peril, because the hydrogen is the gravitational confirmation of the beginning of the periodic table of elements, which is fundamental to the structure of the planet, which is important for us. And then we have the gravitational confirmation of the oxygen, which is important for us in terms of our existence. And then we have the gravitational confirmation of the pH dome reactor, which shows us that we can shield ourselves. So we can choose, what do we absorb, what do we repel? We have that choice, and we have that responsibility. So we have to have a humanity inertia shielding to shield ourselves from the hostiles, from the aggression, from the environmental harm, and most importantly, from fear mongering. So we're headed into uncharted territory. So when you ask, where are you? Well, you're here, and well, you're also here, because we are now going into beyond the nano monatomic state. And we have to take into account our ancestral intelligence, because we are the product of that technology. We are the inertia product, and we have choices. As long as we connect and tune in to the soul food, plug into the creator, that's what we need to do, so that we can receive that energy. We can turn it on and drop out from our resistance. But we have to provide the pattern. That's how we get the energy. So look at the pattern that you're creating, and then you can understand the consequences, because we are the instigators. So we are in the era of gold production. May the 10th, 2025, we hit a milestone, and now we can add to that. So we're asking for people to rally to the space plasma research teams, so that we can continue to bring peace and prosperity to this planet, to continue to bring the greater oneness, the way we have done for 594 knowledge seekers workshops, to offer the suddenly transcending ability to uplift the limitations of the nuclear science, not using it for warmongering, but using it for peaceful purposes, because that is the universal law. So we need to put forward a technology release, because it's hard to sleep when our beds are burning. We need a scientific rescue, a financial rescue, and a political rescue. This all has to do with the preservation of the humanity and its rescue. So as part of the transmutation training, we all have an opportunity to fly with a captain. The next series is June 27th, the 3-part series, to continue to add to the knowledge. And so when we understand the basic books and we see that there's more to understand. And what is our position here? Since we are the observers, are we in the fourth dimension? Is that the correct answer? Well, regardless, our mission is to bring peace on earth and join humanity with the universal community. And the only way we can do that is through equality. So we want to bring man as equal to all the beings in the universe by teaching the plasma science and technology equally to everyone, that no one is left out and no one is abused due to the lack of knowledge. So help us achieve this goal. It's not just our goal, it's your goal. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science, welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers. Yes, we're learning about the new selection process where we get to choose in the new plasma science. And one of the things we have to choose is the World Peace Treaty. We have to sign it and we have to mean it sincerely. So the point of the true nanotech is to maintain integrity. And the peace dome of outer space can be an umbrella or can be a fountain. But the inertia of the present is governed by the dimensions of history. That is inherent in our learning, and it's time to learn the history of self in a universal context. So see that the inertia of self can migrate as a superconductor. So our job is to fill in the blanks of our point of view of the new physical transition dimensions. And the plasma science needs to continue to be delivered daily via the Peace Dome in a practical exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new golden outer space age. And that's the end of this class. And I really hope you've enjoyed the trip. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for continuing to enlighten us. I don't think you could have put it more simply, but yet the understanding is still, the complete understanding is still far away, but we continue to peck away at it, I suppose, each one of us according to our strengths and according to our position. So thank you, Alex, again. Let's see if any of the participants would like to raise a point or have a discussion or join in to voice their understanding. Yes.
Hi, Alex.
Good day.
Good day. Is there a relationship? There has to be, but I just don't understand. I don't understand it per se, but hear this thought. We have the structure of a plasma, the three structure of the plasma, three parts of it. And then we have the magnetic and gravitational field. But Mr. K said there's another field in between the magnetic and gravitational that goes oscillate either to the other, to each, to magnetic or to gravitational. There's an apparent field, so an apparent third ray. And it seems to rhyme with every other thing, has three parts to it as part of creation. You just mentioned now you're using the coordinates. You see the coordinates, the x coordinates, which can go left to right, and you have the y axis coordinate that can go up and down. And then the third one, the z, it seems to go in depth, like inside you or outside you. So would you say there is some type of relationship with the initial structure of a plasma in the sense that if you are to have a full creation, you have to go through the 3 stages.
No, you don't. It's
Okay.
just easier to go step by step. But there's no rule that says you have to go step by step. So that's why let's say you are a pioneer, and let's say this is the North America 150 years ago or 200 years ago. So you have a wagon train headed west. They go very, very slowly, but there's some people who want to see what's down the road. So you send out scouts, and they don't pull a wagon, they just ride the horse and they go. So they can go faster. And then they can go and they can come back and they can report to the rest and say, okay, if we go this way, that'll be safe. Or if we go that way, it'll be better. It'll be shorter. And so that wagon train depends on the scout. Well, this is exactly what we have to have faith in our captains in the transmutation series. Because in terms of the trust that the wagon train has to have in the scout is how we can transmute as a group. But the scout has to have faith in something, right? So the scout doesn't have faith in another scout. So maybe the scout has to have faith in his horse, but frankly, the horse has to have faith in the scout because the scout is riding the horse. So there's a synergy. So the rider, right, is the soul, and the horse is the transportation. And the two work together. So there's a Maggrav relationship between the rider and the horse. And the fundamental glue that holds the bond is trust. So when we look at...
So the trust, is that the third factor?
Exactly.
So that means there has to be 3 stages.
Exactly.
Interesting. It's all process of creation, but we're calling it different things in different ways.
Well, that's where the confusion comes in. Okay, so if you look at the periodic table of elements, see now you brought up a really a huge point. And where are we here? All of the elements are created from hydrogen. But there's a problem. When you look at the periodic table of elements and they're all organized by number, that number represents the number of protons. Every element has a neutron, except hydrogen. Hydrogen does not have a neutron. Unless you consider that the proton is actually a neutron. Unless you consider that the hydrogen is actually an electron and a neutron. But then if you move through the periodic table of elements, that breaks down. It doesn't work. So science has agreed that the hydrogen is an electron-proton combination, and yet is the fundamental element for all of the periodic table of elements. And as you go through that periodic table, each element becomes more and more dense. So the number has a relationship to its density and its mass. And so as we go through that periodic table, there's a progression towards more gravitation. And then what we find as we get down into things like uranium, they can no longer be contained within that physicality, but they start to exhibit a radiation. And so we've been conditioned through the fear mongering to fear this radiation. Well, when we find out that we as human beings have an enormous amount of radiation, and when you go to a party and, I'm looking from a man's point of view, a special woman enters into the room and the whole room is lit up and it's brilliant. And when she leaves, it's kind of gloomy. So, everyone emits this radiation and it's an energy. So that means that energy is always flowing. So we call it something else because it's not hydrogen. So then we call it neon, or we call it chlorine, or we call it germanium. But it's all the same. It's a containment within a MAGRAV condition, and that position to maintain its physicality is determined by its neighbors. So if its neighbors are stable and they create a MAGRAV condition, within that MAGRAV condition, which is specifically what you asked, you can create that MAGRAV condition that is positioned within the boundary of the two neighbors. Isn't that the question that you asked?
Indeed. And what made me ask the question specifically, if you go to the coordinates that you were talking about, you have the 3D and the 2D. You can make the complete creation to what we know in 3D if you have the three coordinates, the X, the Y, and the Z. But,
yes.
But on paper, you can only have the two, X and Y, with no Z.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I was thinking, why is it that you can always have full creation in terms of, and when I say creation, is anything, not, it could be a concept of existence in any shape or form, or in anything we do. There has to be the thought factor. Either we know it or we don't know it yet. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Ike. What this diagram shows is that each axis has its own pathway, and it appears that that pathway is chosen by that axis. But the thing is that that pathway is the pathway of least resistance. And so to have that least resistance, it means the other pathways have to be occupied. So then how do you know which one is occupied? Is the y-axis chosen because the x and the z have occupied? But then how does the z-axis occupy its pathway? It has to depend on the y and the x to be occupied. Well, then the x, how does the x choose? Well, the y and the z. Oh, well, wait a second. So now you've got paralysis coming in here because each axis being dependent on the other two axes can make up its mind because the other axes are depending on it. So which one goes first? Or you say, oh well, let's do the X one first, or let's no, I want to be polite. No. Let's get Z go first. What about Y? Why doesn't Y go first? So what we have to realize is that all three go simultaneously, because that's how you maintain the MAGRAV condition. If you don't have all three coming together, you don't have the universal order of creation of matter. And then what happens? You don't get the book number one. It doesn't happen. Okay? It doesn't happen. You have to have all of them together. And that is just in its basic form. But from there, you now have a dimension positioning. So that's one. And that positioning is based on the other, but they're undifferentiated. So then the question becomes, at what point do they become differentiated? So it's exactly what you said. You have to have all three come together. Thanks very much, Ike. That was you got the point. Holy cow, man. When are you going to take over these classes?
No, I can't do that. You're the one.
All right, thank you, Ike. Thank you, Alex. Anyone else want to raise a point or ask a question? Now, you've mentioned conservation of energy a couple times, maybe 3 or 4, I think, during this presentation, maybe just a couple times. We do have a class about conservation of energy, in a way, MAGRAV positioning. And I think that's what he said about that separation between the magnetical and gravitational. He called that the MAGRAV positioning. And I guess that MAGRAV, when you change that MAGRAV positioning, as we bring the electron closer to the proton, we get a different interaction. But that gap between the magnetical and the gravitational, I think is what he referred to as a MAGRAV positioning. Any confirmation on that?
Totally, Mark, you've graduated.
Hardly. You've been mentioning the conservation of energy, and it does seem like, to me at this point, that all of the technologies in the different areas are all about conservation of energy. We just went through the creation of the Dome of Peace. Did we move our position? Did we make any phone calls? Did we write any emails? No, we just used the interaction of the fields. So the same with feeding ourselves. Can we feed ourselves without eating? Isn't that a conservation of energy in a way? Or
What conservation of energy, you have that connotation, meaning that energy is lost. But energy, in a sense, can't be lost if energy is everywhere. You just take what you need. So it's really an illusion to have this conservation of energy concept. So I don't get it, because if energy is all around us, so what are we losing? Or what are we conserving?
Well, if you're going from Earth to Mars in a matter of minutes rather than 6 months, what sort of conservation of energy would that reflect?
If you're going from Earth to Mars,
conventionally, it says through rocket to, our best system, it's going to take about 6 months to get there. With the plasma technology, you arrive there in seconds, or at the worst.
Yeah, and that's true, and that proves the point that it's an illusion, because we use plasma to get there quicker because the energy is all around us. There's no conservation or wasted of energy. We just are more enlightened on how to use that. But here, they bring up all these things to, confuse people with conserving energy. So what are we conserving if energy is all around us already?
Claudia, I think she has her hand up, but I was also thinking again in energy production. Do we need nuclear reactors? Do we need water flow over turbines or, to move them? We can just interact with the fields and create as much energy as we need. I look at that as a conservation of energy. Yes, Claudia, please.
Hello everyone. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Claudia.
I'd like you to make a question for you about the time that's created in the energy time with the emotions and the intelligence that Mr. Cash explained to us. Because I was thinking that I am here, I create my time with the 3 P's like possession, place, and position. But if I close my eyes, for example, and have an imagination that I am in different points in the universe at the same time, doing many things. So there are other positions that other times that I am creating is, I think, with my emotions and my intelligence. Or do you think that I can be in a matter state in another place at the same time?
Okay,
Is this about physical time and enlightenment time?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I am in matter state here, and I created my time here with the possession, place, and position. But Mr. Cash explained about another way to create a time, and was with the emotions and the intelligence. Could be another, Claudia, for example, if I want with my emotions only in energy position or in a matter position too?
It could be in a matter. From my understanding, it still could be in a matter, but it's a different creation. Look at it as you are, like you said, you are sitting, you are already here, your position, your the place and your possession, and position as a human being is here in this time period. And then if you close your eyes, and would you be able to be in a different position or in a state of possession as a physicality, or in a state of using your intelligence? But you still can manifest that same another position and possession, but that's in a different time period. But to go to that intelligence, to go to that pace fast enough to a higher strength, you have to go through that energy progression of time. So what you acquired from that physical position becomes your emotion, and then it creates an intelligence that you can also have that enlightenment if you are in another position, when you put yourself in another position. So I see how you are looking at it as physical, but you can't use that physical in terms of emotions, intelligence, and enlightenment. That's just the energy progression of the soul. It's two different things, but you still could be manifest, because you can go back and forth. You can still manifest, but now you are in a different time zone. If you look at the movies, the Matrix, that's the way I look at it. When they sit down, they are sitting in that position, and then they close their eyes and they see themselves in a different world. But their physical body are still there, but then they are operating in that other advanced realm. They have activities going and whatever, but that's a different time period. But they still have their physical body. So in a sense, you can still exist in that and go back and forth. You just need to know how to do it, which he will be teaching us how to do all that. And it starts from transmutation, according to Mr. Kesh. That's my understanding.
Could you repeat that question again, Claudia? I don't think I understood it fully.
I am only repeating, for example, the definition to create a time is with the time, position, possession, and another way is with the emotion and intelligence. For example, I am here on Earth with matter state and with my fathers. I create my position here, and my emotions. So I am here and I created that time. But if I close my eyes, because I am energy, and my emotions, like for example, I want to be in 10 places at the same time, not only one. I don't know. I don't want to go only to work now. I want to be in 10 places.
You said 10.
And I want to continue here working, for example.
You said you want to be in 10 different places?
Yes.
Okay.
This is only, I will create 10 different times. And I think it's only possible with the emotions and the intelligence.
Yeah, yes, Claudia.
Create.
You're right. You can be in 10 places, you can be in multiple places at the same time. Mr. Kesh said that. But the way to understand it, the way I understood it is, Mr. Kesh called it the evolution of physicality. Starts with when you create the time, you have the place, position, and possession. That's you create the time period. That's the evolution of all the physicality. So that's where you're sitting. Now, if you want to create another time period and be in multiple places where your physicality is still there, but you can still operate in different other places, that becomes evolution of the soul. And that's where you have the emotion, the intelligence, and then the enlightenment. Because now you are existing in energy, you can still operate, you can still exist in different forms in multiple places. But your physicality is still there in that evolution of physicality. That's Mr. Kosh.
But like if I go in this point that you are saying, why I am here only to why is the objective, how can I say, is the objective to be here?
What's the point of being here?
What's the point?
Objective?
Yeah.
Well, that's why it says physicality is an illusion, because the real thing is the energy. That's what it says. But remember, this physicality that you are here is because we have the magnetic fields, we have the possession, we have all this to fit this physical body in this place that we're in, this time period. So it might not be possible to have the same exact look in other places, but you can exist in different time period. But the way to do it, you can exist when you have that enlightenment in the progression of your soul. So your soul can be in multiple places while your physicality is still here.
So it seems that my soul, motion of my soul, knows and choose to be here now. And that's better for me. It's better for all the things that I do, the persons I have a life, you know. I think it's, I don't know if you think the same way, but how can I say, Mark, this chosen was made before I born or not?
Saying the soul
That's the
made the
point.
choice? The soul
Yeah,
made
the choice. Before, or it's a continuation? I don't know. It's hard
Yeah,
to
you do know.
understand.
No, you're correct. That's 100% correct. You made that choice. So to understand the relationship, what a brilliant conversation this is. To understand the relationship of the emotion and the intelligence. So the foundation is the trust, but the point is that there is a purpose in life. Life is not purposeless. So just because we may not have the intelligence to answer that question, or we want to answer that question in terms of the physicality feedback, right? So the point of life is so that you can work on the assembly line and manufacture a car and then retire and then die. Is that the point of life? No, life is for learning. So you can only learn in time. If you are out of time, then that learning, what you have done, is archived. And it's archived in your inertia RNA. And then when you go to another place and you shall we say, manifest in physicality, that physicality will carry forward that RNA inertia. And at that point, time begins again. And at that point, learning continues. So our reference to time is exclusive on Earth space because we base it on the rotation of the Earth and the number of times it rotates while it has to travel around the sun. So it has to travel 365 rotations around the sun. We call that a year. And that's how we measure the time. It is during that time, in time of your physicality, that you can learn. And so everything that you learned before you had your memory, that was already part of your RNA inertia field. So you are only able to add to that memory in time. And that time is from the time that you entered the physicality and the time that you exit that physicality. What we have now come to the point of learning is that we can continue this exercise and, as you say, be in multiple locations at the same time. And each one of them would be a learning experience. And each one of them would be adding to our knowledge. So this is a terrific conversation.
And
So,
that's the strength of the soul. That's new learning is you are increasing your strength soul.
right.
But Alex, could be a person, a soul that it's a illuminated soul that she is on the future, but came only, like Mr. Cash, came only to help, only to teach us. He is here with matter state, and he chose this to give
That's
us
right.
this.
That's right. Of course you did. You didn't come here because of the glint in Daddy's eye.
Yeah, because I always say to the knowledge seeker that is every day with us, and because I do so many things in matter state, and I created another Claudia energy point in an energy state that do intentions, do many things, and and I do my things here,
That's right.
and that's it.
That's right. So if you see that process and you become aware of that process, then why would you not trust that process? Because that process is initiated by you, and you are more than just what you see in the mirror. Okay, so you are part and parcel of the creator. You're that you know you're that fragment, but you have all the attributes of the creator. So you have an advantage over us because you have beauty. Okay, we have an advantage over you because we have strength. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have strength, and doesn't mean that we don't have a beauty. It's just a gradient. Okay, so it becomes a danger when you overcompensate. So you say, well, your strength is in how many muscles you have, or your beauty is in, how much makeup you put on your face, or your strength is based on, your academic acquisition of knowledge. But each of us is part and parcel of the whole. Each of us is a fragment of that. And so what we need to strive for is a balance, and there is a purpose on this planet, which I'm happy to say, because frankly, I have to admit that, I wasn't sure of the purpose on this planet. But, you know, eh, you have to have a purpose. I mean, what's the purpose? Otherwise, what is the purpose? There's no purpose. If there's no purpose to life, well, then, but that's what they'd have us believe. Well, that's not true. So we all have a contribution to make. Thank you. Thank you very much. Brilliant, brilliant discussion.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Thank you.
Her soul decided to come here for its own elevation or evolution in a way, but also to enlighten the others. Do you think the souls are aware, Alex, of what's happening on this planet at this time? And some of them perhaps decided to come here and create and help along with this process?
Okay, so you're asking me directly, so the answer is yes, directly. The thing is that each of us has to learn in our own way. Okay, so if uh, I you can tell me, and maybe I will learn, or you can tell me and I'll say, well, I'm not sure if what you're telling me is correct. So uh, you say, well, don't stick your finger inside the electric socket. Well, I don't know if you are an electrician or if you're knowledgeable. So I'm going to go and find out myself, and I'm going to stick my finger in my electric socket. Now, I may not survive. The shock may be so big that it'll kill me. Or I may get a second chance and say, whoa, Mark was right. I shouldn't stick my finger in that socket. And fortunately for me, I lived to tell about it. Well, that's exactly how I feel because, when I found out how to eradicate cancer, I got a second chance and I was 40 years old. Okay, so the doctor gave me 6 months to live, and that was 35 years ago. And I said, well, you have all that education, you have all that knowledge, and you are 100% wrong. And you convinced me that you were right, and I believed you. And I went that way, and I discovered that you were wrong, but it would have cost me my life to find out. But I got a second chance. So within 3 weeks, I got my health back. Within 3 weeks, I went from being able to kick a soccer ball only 10 yards to being able to kick it 60 yards in 3 weeks. So what we're talking about is a rate of change. And then, I had to confront the issue. And the issue was that I tried it this way, it didn't work. I tried it the other way, and it worked. But nobody believes me. So what do? Do I go back to the other way and say, oh, it worked, but, I don't believe it? Or do you say, thank you very much, I got a second chance, and now I'm going to find out more knowledge? And that's what I did. But it wasn't without penalties along the way. Because, when you are kind of leading, you're the scout, and the rest of the caravan is, waiting for your answer, and you come back and you say, hey, I've got the answer. And they say, yeah, let's get a second opinion. And this has been the problem with the Kish Foundation. We have the answer. We have the technology. We've demonstrated the technology. But, if you're refusing to, look at the obvious, and, in just a basic relationship, do you love your partner? And how much do you love them? This is what the dilemma the one-armed fisherman had. He caught a fish that was that big. So, we have to understand that there's more to understand. And then we have to have the trust in that. That's really why we're all here. Otherwise, we're squandering a beautiful afternoon. But, as we talk, people are dying. And these people are part of our humanity. So the rate of change is not fast enough. And we are part of that change. That's the purpose of our life. Our life is to learn. And if we can't learn from our mistakes, we can learn from other people's mistakes. And if we can't learn from that, then we can learn from our history. That's what the purpose of history is. So thank you very much. Back to you, Mark.
Okay, anyone else being prompted or provoked to raise an issue or a question? Feel free. Again, nobody's going to criticize you or take exception with you. They're just going to explain the way they see it.
Well, the way I see it is Claudia and I can take over, and I can sit back and munch on potato chips or something.
There'll be plenty of time for that, Alex. You mentioned the brain a bit, and I know some people say you don't want to think in this whole process, but as we see in one of the videos we play, the secret is in the brain and the spaceship is within the soul of the man. And of course, we know the soul is within the cranium, let's say, of the man. So is the brain playing? He said the brain of the universe works the same as the brain of the man. So does the brain play, even though we think of it as a matter state, it certainly looks like a half-sphere plasmatic spaceship reactor to me. Do you want to comment on the brain at all?
Yes, I do, because one of the shocking things to me was that there is such a thing as brain food, and that is calcium. And, when you look at the rest of the body, the blood flows through the body. But when you look at the brain, the blood flows around the brain. So what we think as an important part of the body, and it is an important part, the blood, we find that it isn't the most important thing as far as the brain is concerned. It works under different rules. And it is because of the bicameral mind, the left and right hemisphere, that it interacts. So it's the same principle as the cup of life, where we have the copper and the zinc comes together. But what's incorrect about this picture is that it isn't copper on one side and zinc on the other side. It's the relationship of the physical emotional state on one side and the relationship of the physical emotional state on the other side, and the gradient thereof. So the gradient on one side tends to be more on the physical side, and the gradient on the other side tends to be more on the emotional side. And since there is a crossover, the reason for the crossover is because it's going from the brain state, where the blood goes around the brain, to the physical state where the blood goes through the body. And so we find that the heart, as far as the body is concerned, is slightly on the left-hand side. Slightly. Okay? Slightly off center. And our convergence is slightly to the right. And so if we can be more centered, we would be in more balance. But that off-centeredness is offset by the gradient charge within our brain. So if the heart is slightly on the left, then the emotional MAGRAV context is more emotional on the right side of the brain. And then the left side would be the more practical, because so that the right side of the body would be more physical. And we know that is true because that's where the liver is. The liver is slightly on the right-hand side. And so what is the job of the liver? Well, the job of the liver is to purify all the cells of the body in physicality. But the liver is a plasmatic, operates on plasmatic principle, as does the heart. So if we understand that the organs understand how to exchange energy, then we have to trust them, because we do trust them. Are you sitting there thinking about, oh, heart, bumpity bumpity, keep bumping, or, oh, my liver, I need to, clean this up. No, there is no discrimination. The soul of the man looks after the entire body. It doesn't say, I'm going to do the heart on Mondays, and I'm going to do the liver on Tuesdays, and then, we'll do the spleen once a month, and, maybe weekends, we might do a lung. It doesn't work that way. Everything that needs gets fed. Everything. Indiscriminately, unconditionally, and come forth with the emotion, the interaction, the feedback from the physicality, and the feeding from the brain. And all of that is connected to the soul. So that the soul becomes the rider of the body, the rider of the physicality. And it's based on the image of the creator. So what part of the creator is our image? Is our image of the physicality, or is our image more related to the conformity of the brain? I never thought about that, but I'm thinking about it now. And, that really makes sense because we know that the mind is the builder. Good question. Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, no, he said that this double hemispheric brain is not a unique creation in the universe, but it's not a common creation. So this double hemispheric side, is this part of what we're referring to as twinity in a way, in combination with the soul? We see the creator in Mitra, we see the magnetical and gravitational, the yin and the yang, and all these other things. There seems to be a twinity process quite prevalent in the universe, or at least within our understanding at this point.
So I think the point of today's presentation has been well absorbed. And I appreciate your comments there, Mark, because it shows that you've been listening. Thank you very much. It's excellent.
Okay, anyone else have a point or a question? So back to this Pico again, I have a strong feeling that Mr. Kesh built up from the below Pico into the Pico and then back into the nano and the matter state. This is what he actually showed, but was hidden in a way. Again, this is part of getting rid of the Big Bang Theory. He didn't go from large pieces of gold down to small. He created a small interaction, and then that built up into creating the atoms, or the combination of atoms we saw manifest or appear on camera. So again, I think he's using this Pico understanding, as he referred to the creator as small, weak, and a giver. But as you say, you have to know how to set these systems up. They look like they're parallel, but I see some small angles on these reactors and other things that I think you showed a picture of the reactors there. And one seems to have a bit of a tilt. As he said, this is 40 years worth of understanding this science. So it's not something we can pick up in a second. But it does look like the reactors were set and staged, and of course certain materials within them that wasn't a GANs, as I understand it as well.
Well, there you go. You see, each of those reactors is differentiated, isn't it?
Are we showing the reactors here with the gold? The one there, okay. And then you had a close-up of one, I think, somewhere along the way. And we could see it. Yeah, now here you go. You look at the one on the right, you could see the top of it seems to have a little different angle than the one to the left of it. Would you agree with that? Slightly different. You see the top of the housing here. Or it could be an illusion, but it does look like these are set at slightly different angles to interact.
You could have a point, Mark. The picture is deceptive. So it's not a conclusive picture, but what is conclusive is that each of these reactors, although the configuration is identical, the contents of the reactors is different.
Right. But again, this could be you and this could be me, and we see an interaction of fields. We're huge field generators, and this is the point I think he wants us to understand. And we're even creating cosmic rays within that brain structure. So you're thinking about gathering cosmic rays. We're actually creating cosmic rays within that combination of the left and the right hemisphere and the soul, most likely. Again, I'm still in the nursery, let's say, but we're learning a little bit more to how to crawl.
Well, I have to confess that a few days ago, I had no idea what I was going to talk about today. And Mr. Kesh has mentioned that many times, how, Rick puts up a intro and it's very relevant to what Mr. Kesh had intended to teach that day. And, what is rewarding to me personally is the question and answers discussion that we've had today. It's really, really gratifying and encouraging to hear these questions and to hear this dialogue, because I think frankly all of us are starving, really to hear that. And it all stems from not being able to put the whole picture together, or to get some kind of guidelines. And so I thought maybe I'd bring some kind of basics together, and it's ignited a magnificent discussion, which means that we are all asking the same questions, and we're not getting the total answer. So we need to get a basis so that we can rest our trust on that. Okay? We can't have this trust that is kind of fluttering. Well, I'll trust it on Monday, and I don't know about Tuesday. We have to trust it all the time. All of us here on the panel have spent an enormous amount of time, and the payoff is here and now, because this understanding, this emotion, this intelligence, it is, by having this trust, it has a calming effect. It has a peaceful effect. And so each and every one of us is able to navigate through life with a more contented viewpoint. And this allows you to then transmute in your dreams to further add to the knowledge. So the amount that you can absorb is totally, totally dependent on the amount of trust that you give to the system. And that is true, because if you go to bed and you try and say, I'm going to go to sleep now, you'll never go to sleep. You'll be sitting there for 2 hours and you'll be exhausted. And then when you say, oh man, I just can't get to sleep, I'm just so totally tired, I give up. And at that point in time, boom, you've gone to sleep. So you cannot physically dictate, the terms. You have to trust the emotion and the intelligence of your soul, as Claudia says. Thank you very much today for allowing me to present. I think this was very exciting, and it just shows how important our mission is. Thank you.
Right. I think Claudia's question was very apropos. We're all been searching for what is this void or this emptiness in the way we feel. And I think you said the knowledge seekers are trying to fill it, but isn't the whole humanity trying to fill that void? And of course, you try with a better job, perhaps getting married and having children, getting a new car, or something, but all those are very short lived. They don't give that satisfaction that we're looking for. And of course, most of the people don't realize there's an energy dimension. So maybe they try bowling, or they try, football or something else, but none of it leads to that a more complete satisfaction of understanding who you are and what you are in the universe. So this knowledge fits perfectly, I think, within the space that everyone's looking to fill. But most people, including myself, never realized there was this really vast energy dimension and knowledge that we could actually feel quite satisfied in getting a grasp on it, rather than the new job, the new car, the new wife, the new home, and all the other things, they never end up satisfying for very long for most people. So again, we're blessed to be here, that we can have some calmness and understanding more about this creation process. And it doesn't just fall out of the sky, I guess. It does take a little work on our part. And we're still continually working on it. Anyone else want to raise a point or a question or make a comment? Alex seems to be quite tickled today. Are there any further thoughts or comments from anyone? Alex, any last comments, or any last comments anyone else would like to share with us? Again, continuing in this idea that the Keshe Foundation does need more support at this point in time to get us over this shortfall or whatever's going on in the background. I'm sure, as I said, if Mr. Keshe didn't need it, he certainly wouldn't ask for the support.
Well, that's another point, isn't it? We have to ask for help in a timely fashion. We're all interdependent.
Go ahead, sorry.
I just said we're all interdependent.
Okay, until we apparently separate now, is that your understanding that when the physicality dies, the soul of physicality also expires? I always thought we took it with us, but now he's saying we need to find a twin to interact with, even though I believe, as he said, the creator didn't interacted with himself, I guess, and created Mitra and so on and so forth. So maybe our soul of physicality does expire at a certain point, or is, as Mr. Keshe has said a number of times, where he went to cemeteries and other places where he released the soul. Now, whether that was the soul of the man or it sounds like the soul of physicality. But again, this knowledge is very, very deep and highly interconnected, to put it all together.
Well, these are definitely tough questions, and I think if Mr. Keshe has an advantage. He's been involved with the research, and so he's been able to see the practical application of his theories. So this conversation that you just brought up, this is not a frivolous conversation. Now that we are starting to expose the truths and the reality, our difficulty is to compare it to our existing knowledge, and it's shaking us at our foundation. That's for sure. But on the other hand, it's a question that's not been answered. So why hasn't it been answered? Because what we've had put forward as an answer, which usually is "I don't know," is not acceptable. So, we have to, shall we say, dig deeper, but we don't have to dig deeper. We have to dig smarter. We have to understand the truth of the reality, as opposed to our, shall we say, our interpretation of the reality. Our interpretation is important for us in terms of our peacefulness. But, if we don't understand that our neighbor needs to be peaceful as well, then we are missing the whole point. That we are part of the community, and the community needs to be peaceful. And in our contribution to that community is to be peaceful. So that's when you get the harmony. And once you have that, then you have the prosperity. And, you know, the talk is cheap, the action is direct. And so we as knowledge seekers are enlisting the services of our souls and making sure that we give to our neighbors whatever we can. And I'm sure you're going to be reading our Universal Council's wish today. So I'll pass it back to you, Mark, and thank everybody for being here.
Okay, I'm not aware of the Universal Council's wish for today. Guess I haven't been briefed in on it. But I would like to show again the three wise men. Can I take the screen, Alex?
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, here we go. And let's bring up our, oops, I think we'll just go there. Let's just bring up our three wise men. And again, this is why they're calling them wise men, but it's for you to apply it. The thinking, speaking, I'll share this, and acting good. And most of us have missed this, but I think this is an important, integral part of the whole operation. I remember Christ saying in the holy books, if you think it, you have as much as committed it. So this is where our brain and our interaction in that dimension, in that energy dimension, can actually take us to different places just through those energy interactions. So again, consider applying the gifts. If you'd like to receive a gift, here are three for you to receive and to actually work out in your life more and more as I see it. These are huge shielding and also enlightenment and keeping you from getting entangled in too many fields that maybe you don't want to get entangled. But we're all growing into this knowledge. So I'd like to play the a couple of ads with the spaceship flight system that we saw, and perhaps this is what we'll see the drone technology grow into, because he's talking about the future of drones, and perhaps this is part of the flying car and delivery systems and the rest. So I'm going to play that, and the alkalizer is also in this video, so you can find that alkalizer picture in the Keshe Foundation store, and then I'll play the final disclaimer and the meeting will come to an end for now. As we know, the knowledge never ends, and we keep going with it. And a lot of beautiful times are ahead for humanity, and we want to thank each and every one that's here, that your soul has brought you here for a specific reason. Again, I think to find out more about yourself and the creation, but also to disperse this knowledge and bring this planet into more association, let's say, with the universal community. So thank you all. Have an amazing rest of your day. I'll play these clips. Any other comments? So I think this is perhaps what the drone technology in a way will lead into. As he said, we have to accommodate all. If people are not comfortable at the point in time of using the energies of transmutation, they can use the physicality, and that will probably, in a way, enlighten them into accepting what they can do or that they haven't trusted in. So thank you all. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll see you in one of the next meetings. Thank you again, Alex, for continuing to share with us.
The revolutionary new Flight Enhancement Spaceship Unit is due to be launched in June 2022, and in the same year is expected to fly passengers into space, to the moon and beyond for a day or even several days at a time. There is no need for the Flight Enhancement Spaceship Unit to carry food or medicine, as it is equipped with the latest space technology for transportation, transmutation and deep space operation. This extraordinary breakthrough technology ushers in a new era of travel without the need of fuel, food or medicine, even during the longest excursions into deep space. Each spaceship unit has a 4-passenger capacity for long or short duration flights and has the capability to travel between cities on Earth in a matter of seconds to minutes, depending on the distance and speed. This ability to traverse massive distance in such incredibly short time is not just a breakthrough for human transport, it also completely revolutionizes the transportation of goods and cargo and will rapidly overcome the need for one of our most polluting practices, namely marine shipping, as it finally breaks us free not only from the combustion of heavy diesel, but from the combustion of any fuel for propulsion in the future. The Flight Enhancement Spaceship Unit, a new paradigm in space travel, space medicine, and space technology.
Water is the foundation of our life. It is part of every living creature. Pure water gives you the energy of nature. Now you can have this energy in your home. The KAKT Foundation Alkalizer and Energizer is designed for your daily well-being. It increases the pH of the water so your body can absorb more oxygen and stay in its natural condition during the day. KAKT Foundation Alkalizer and Energizer. Be pure like the water.
Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.